Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to join. Do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi. We've disabled the chat feature as we've discovered it can cause problems for some people using screen readers, but the Q&A option is still live. So I can see the numbers jumping up, lots of participants joining us today. Glad you could make it. Let's leave it a few more moments. Okay, I can see a few more of you have joined us now, so we'll make a start. So hello everyone, and welcome to How Tech Can Help with Hearing Loss. I'm Annie Mannion from AbilityNet, and I'm Digital Marketing Manager, and I'll be running you through today's session. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, we're joined today by Rachel from Sign Solutions, and she'll be providing live British Sign Language translation for you today. You can increase the view of the panel, including the BSL interpreter, by sliding the panel bar that's on the right. This can only be done on desktops and laptops though, not on mobile phones. So for the best view of BSL, if you can join on your desktop or laptop. We also have live captions provided by MyClearText. You can turn on the captions using the CC option on the control panel. And then additional captions are available via streamtext.net/player?event=AbilityNet. And we'll be putting that in the Q&A as well. Slides are available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet, and then also on our website at abilitynet.org.uk/webinar-hearing loss. And then if you have any technical issues or you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email in a couple of days' time with the recording, the transcript and the slides. And then depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find the Q&A window. So please do drop any questions in there for the panel to address. And if we don't manage to get through your questions during the live session, we'll be looking at questions after the session on our website at the same address, webinar-hearing loss. And finally, we also have a feedback survey you'll be directed to at the end, which invites you to tell us about any future topics you'd like us to cover. So please do complete that if you're able. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with AbilityNet, we support people of any age living with any disability or impairment to use technology to achieve their goals at home, at work and in education. And we do this by providing specialist advice services, digital accessibility testing and training. We also offer workplace inclusion consultancy and free information resources like this webinar. So I'll share a little bit more about our services at the end of the webinar. So today we're going to learn from Matthew Johnston, who is Global Head of Disability Inclusion at ThoughtWorks and a digital accessibility advocate. He's spent his career so far in the tech industry. Matthew was born deaf, and he's also a trustee of Stage Text and Scope charities. And we also welcome James Watson O'Neill, who joined the deaf health charity Sign Health as chief executive in 2016. And he's worked in the charity sector since 2001, including at Scope and the NSPCC. And he was also awarded an OBE for services to deaf people in the Queen's New Year's Honours List this year. And then we're also joined by Ian Wilson, who is AbilityNet's County Coordinator for Warwickshire Tech Volunteers. He's lived experience of hearing loss, and later on will share information about hearing aids linked to iPhones. And Stuart Goldberg is AbilityNet's County Coordinator for Hertfordshire Tech Volunteers. He's now retired, but he's had a varied IT career spanning 40 years. and he has a hearing impairment and uses technology where he can to mitigate this. So before we kick off today's webinar content, I'm just going to start with a poll just to find out a bit more about who's joining us today. So I'll just launch the poll now. So can you tell us, do you currently experience some level of hearing loss? So the answers are yes, I am deaf. Yes, I have severe hearing loss. Yes, I have some hearing loss, or no. So I'll just leave that a few moments for everybody to answer. Depending on how you joined the webinar, you may find you can't see the poll, but you can respond in the Q&A panel. So I'll just leave it a few more moments. Okay, I think most people have answered, nearly. So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So the majority of people on the webinar, 62% do not currently experience some level of hearing loss. The next answer is yes, I have some hearing loss at 28%. Then we have yes, I have severe hearing loss at 6%, and then 4% of you say you're deaf with lowercase d or uppercase d. So thank you. It's just useful to gauge the experience of people joining us today for the discussion. So now I'd like to introduce two of our AbilityNet volunteer coordinators that I mentioned earlier. So welcome Ian Wilson and Stuart Goldberg. So I'd just like to ask you to explain briefly a little bit about what you do at AbilityNet as tech volunteers. Who would like to go first? Okay, Ian, yeah, please go ahead.
Hi everyone. So my name's Ian Wilson. As Annie said, I'm the county coordinator for Warwickshire and for the West Midlands. So what that means is, we're a volunteer group. We have about 330 volunteers across the country, and effectively any sort of inquiry that comes in for Warwickshire or for the West Midlands will come to me as the county coordinator, and then I'll distribute that to the volunteers. So I have about 10 volunteers throughout Warwickshire and the West Midlands, and depending on sort of location or technology, I'll distribute the ticket to them. And what we offer is, initially a phone call, but then a home visit to people that require it. And all our volunteers at DBS checked and and have technology, so we can typically go in, make one or more visits to a client who has a technology issue and help them solve it. So that's basically what I do for AbilityNet. So I'll hand over to Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Well, I'm the coordinator for Hertfordshire, and essentially I do what Ian does, except I do it in Hertfordshire as opposed to Warwickshire. Well, that's it really. We've got a team of about 8 volunteers covering the county. And whatever Ian says is what we do. If an inquiry comes from someone living in Hertfordshire, then it will come to me, and I'll pass it on to one of our volunteers there.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. I know you both do an amazing job. I just wanted to pose a question to both of you, really. Could you share some information about the tech adjustments or assistive technology that we can advise those with hearing loss to consider? I know.
Yeah, so I'll go first. I know Stuart probably has some additional ones that I work with. So I have some mild hearing loss myself. It's not acute, but I do use hearing aids, and they are connected through Bluetooth to my phone. So I have some ability on the phone to use the phone as a microphone, or to increase the volume in the hearing aids through the phone. And then what I really like is things like Google Maps. If I'm walking through London or anywhere else, the directions just come direct through to my hearing aids, which is very nice. So I can just walk along and it says turn left, turn right. I also use closed captions on a not all the time, but particularly if I've been on lots of calls during the day. So closed captions in either Zoom or Teams, and so I'm very, very happy to take our clients through that, and they find it quite helpful, because it's not always obvious on Teams or Zoom how to use the captions. So that's something I'll always work with. There are a number of accessibility options on the various devices. So whether it's Windows or Android or Google or Apple, there's always some standard functions. But if that's not good enough, then there are some other options we can go to. So I'll hand over to Stuart, because I know he uses some additional functions other than the ones I've described. So I'll go over to Stuart.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I've got I don't know if you call it severe hearing loss for not wearing hearing aids, and I am fairly deaf. Like Ian, I have Bluetooth enabled hearing aids, which streams directly from my iPhone. So for me, it's easier for someone to ring me on my mobile rather than on the landline for that reason. The other thing, I got a device that came with this particular brand of hearing aids called a multi-mic, which streams directly to the hearing aids. It can be used as a microphone to amplify people's voices. And I can also plug it into the headphone socket on my TV or computer. And that, again, feeds directly through to my hearing aids. And in fact, that's what I'm using at the moment. I've got the device plugged into my computer's headphone socket. There's an iPhone app called Hearing Helper, which is free on the Apple App Store, and it converts speech to text. It's not bad, actually. Don't use it very often, but quite often you can use it, and it'll help you understand better what the person is saying. Like Ian, I use closed captions if they're available. One thing I would caution is you've got some apps give you automatically generated captions like YouTube, and they're not necessarily 100% accurate. So you need to, if you haven't got any hearing at all, then you need to be a bit cautious about what it's saying. The final thing I'd like to say is on the AbilityNet website, AbilityNet.org UK, there are a number of fact sheets. And one I would recommend anyone with hearing loss downloading is called Hearing Loss and Computing, because among other things, it's got a load of software apps, relevant apps and equipment that might be of use. And I would say what I use and what Ian uses is iPhone related, but there are the equivalents of both the hardware and software available for Android is out there, and just got to look for it. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for all the valuable work you do with AbilityNet. and all our other volunteers around the country as well. Some of you who I'm sure are watching the webinar today, and we'll put the hearing loss fact sheet link into the Q&A and also onto the recording page that we'll share with everybody after the webinar as well. So thank you. We'll come back into the panel discussion in a minute, but I just wanted to say a little bit about the AbilityNet Tech volunteer opportunities. So as Ian and Stuart mentioned, it's a varied role and often very rewarding. We've got a UK-wide network of 300 tech volunteers. So, you know, you may be helping to set up a new device, connect to the internet, solve a problem with a computer virus, or support somebody to connect with family and friends online. And then we also offer training opportunities and social events for volunteers as well. I think some of our volunteers have been with us for more than 10 years and win awards for various work that they do. So we've just got a slide that's just to share a couple of the positive comments that we've received. So I get lots of support from AbilityNet staff and from the excellent website. I always feel valued when I'm working and never feel judged when I'm not. There's a welcoming, supporting environment, excellent training and totally rewarding. And then I've got another example related to hearing loss in particular, about our volunteer Angela, who is very, very helpful, well-spoken, which was excellent for my hearing loss. She shared her knowledge of computing, and Angela was brilliant, good at what she does, and had no worries about her coming to my house. I can't fault anything she did, and I learned about my devices. So really, this is just a shout out to say we're always looking for more volunteers around the UK, and we're in particular need of support in Sussex, always London, Manchester, East Yorkshire, Edinburgh, Wales. So really around the country, if it's something that is something that you're interested in doing, or you're inspired to help, it could be the perfect New Year's resolution. So we look forward to hearing from you, and it's /volunteer on the AbilityNet website. Great. So now I have a few questions to address to all of our panel. And then after these questions, we'll take any questions that have come through from you all watching as attendees on the Q&A. So just to start with question one. So we've heard hearing loss makes me feel exhausted is a kind of common comment that we've learned. So things like guessing words and filling in the blanks, following conversations with missing words. So with that in mind, are there particular apps or assistive technologies you can suggest that could help? If I could bring in Matthew to answer the question first, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Great. So just to let you know that I am deaf, born deaf, and I've always worn hearing aids through my life. It took about 10 years ago, I wear a cochlear implant. Now, some of you may already know what a cochlear implant is, but for those who don't, it's a similar process to like a hearing aid, except they drill a hole behind my ear to put a wire, and the wire goes into the cochlea, which is the size of a pea, and it's like a snail. So the wire goes inside this cochlea, and there are 16 electrodes. So each electrode contains a block of frequency. It's not perfect, but it improved my hearing by 50%, which is remarkable. So it gives me more confidence, and I'm able to hear more sound. The first one was really unusual was the tweaking trolley in the supermarket. I thought that was fascinating. Anyway, so what tech do I need to help me? So I need lots of tech. I'm a techie, so I love tech, so I could try them out. So I have a cochlear implant which improved my listening by 50%. Not say that everybody should have one. You should speaks to a specialist. There are several cochlear implant centre in the UK. You could have a conversation with them, and it's all funded by the National Health Service. It may not suit everybody. I should just be aware. Secondly, you could have a Bluetooth. So my cochlear implant is Bluetooth enabled. So I connect many of my Bluetooth enabled devices like the laptop, the phone, television through Bluetooth. So that gives me more clarity of the phone, of the voice, which is fantastic. I do rely on captions, and I get very tired. So I try and limit the number of meetings called per day. You know, I'm like a battery. The more media I have, the faster the battery run out. So you need to help yourself, take care of yourself, and say, sorry, I've got so many meetings, I'm going to stop. Or, you know, you help yourself, set yourself a number of meetings. I also have two types of caption. One is caption that are provided by the human captioning, for example, that we have right now. I also have the auto caption, which is not always accurate, but it's faster. So I have both. And having both combination of both helped me enormously. Yeah, these are the tech that I use them every day. You can on your phone, if you don't, I mean, I have a Google phone which provides real-time caption. But not everybody have a Google phone, a Pixel phone. You can, if you have an Android or a Microsoft or Apple, you could download an app. It's called Translive or Transcribe from Microsoft and Google. And you can use that to help you to translate when you go shopping or other places, or if you go to a hospital or you want to see your GP. It doesn't work very well when you have a very noisy background because it's unable to detect the speech really well. Also, it depends on the microphone of the phone. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, loads of fantastic suggestions. Yeah, really great ideas. I'm sure very useful for people to take away. James, can I bring you in now if you've got particular thoughts on the question?
Sure, thanks, Honey, and thanks for the chance to be with you today. It is great to be taking part in an event that is so accessible, and congratulations to AbilityNet for making that happen. I think having a sign language interpreter, having Rachel with us today, and also having Kate, who's providing those super accurate captions for us, is something we don't always see in online events. So congratulations to you for making sure that happens. So I work at Sign Health with a deaf people's health charity, and we focus particularly on deaf people who use British Sign Language to communicate. But that's a more and more blurred boundary than ever, really. And I think some of your poll was asking people to kind of identify in different ways, and I think that's a really interesting question. I identify as deaf. I think probably on an audiogram, I probably have slightly more hearing than Matthew, and maybe some similar hearing to Stuart or Ian. But some of it's about identity, isn't it, and about how you choose to describe yourself. And increasingly, we see a conversation about whether the division between capital D deaf and lower D deaf is a helpful division, or whether in fact we should be more inclusive and so on. So it's good to see the language evolving. What we know is that as deaf people, we do face additional barriers when it comes to accessing information. And so, yes, like Matthew and Ian and Stuart, I use technology in my life. I'm connected to my audio in this meeting through my computer with Roger On device made by Phonak, which links to my hearing aids. And I'm using captions as well. But But the question is interesting because, of course, your original question was the quote, "Hearing loss makes me exhausted," and that's a common comment, and I think that's really true. I'm lucky enough to work almost all the time with deaf people, and we have a very kind of strong human rights empowered approach to being deaf, and I would want to kind of redirect the sentence and say it's not me being deaf that makes me exhausted, it's hearing people's inability to make information accessible that exhausts me. So I'm lucky to have lots of meetings with colleagues in sign language, so I don't need to hear. I'm communicating in sign language with my colleagues, or I'm in events like this which are really accessible and they're much easier to participate in. It's when I'm in an environment which is much less accessible that it becomes exhausting. But that's about the environment, it's not about me being deaf. I think that's a really important distinction, but it's one that many of us as deaf people sort of subconsciously don't use. But we know in our charity, for example, we provide psychological therapy for deaf people directly in sign language. We have a contract with NHS England to do that. And we know that deaf people are twice as likely to experience mental health difficulties as hearing people. There's really good research that backs up that information, and that's obvious from our life experience. It can be a very isolating experience and lead to lots of mental health issues at different times of life as well, depending on your experience of becoming deaf or losing your hearing, whatever language you want to use. So it is important, I think, for us to be aware of the risk of isolation and loneliness and poor mental health and think about the impact. And that might be different when it comes to thinking about deaf children at school, to deaf people in the workplace, through to older deaf people who are perhaps a bit more isolated or living in a hearing nursing home, whatever it might be. So lots and lots of things to think about. And we're here to help as much as we can as a charity. We provide lots of health information, particularly for sign language users, but really interested in taking part in events like this too. So very grateful for the chance to participate. Thank you.
Well, glad you could join us, and yeah, it's those are really good valid points you're making, and yeah, we completely agree. Stuart and Ian, I know you've mentioned a few tech solutions that you'd suggest, but is there anything else that you'd like to add for this question, or we could move on to the next one depending on anything you'd like to add?
The only thing I would say is technology I use is very helpful. As I said, I can hear better on my iPhone than I can someone rings me on the landline. But there is it's not perfect, and I doubt, because sound is a very peculiar thing in my view, quite complicated, and I think we've yet to get to the point where we get perfect technology. And even so, if I'm having a conversation with most people, either over the phone or face to face, there will be times when I say, sorry, can you repeat that, please? And I'm sure my colleagues have found that wearing a mask, as we often do over the last few years, is a real menace to someone who's hard of hearing. I mean, I'm really fortunate today, all the other speakers I've been able to hear so far very clearly. Is tribute to you. And, you know, that is not always the case with the man or woman in the street. So we just have to accept that technology is good. It helps a heck of a lot, but it is not perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, just a couple for me, Annie. So I think it was interesting hearing James talk about sort of isolation and loneliness. I think as AbilityNet volunteers, sometimes I think it's 50% fixing the technology and 50% listening. You know, just having a tea or a coffee, you know, with our client and just just having a chat. So it is quite often, as I say, 50% around the technology and 50% around the person. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, we do a lot of Teams and Zoom meetings, and there were just a few things that were passed on to me that might be helpful. If your hearing is good, just be aware of people on the call whose hearing is maybe not as good, maybe using lip reading. So we talk about plain dark clothing, having a light on your face, the background being very plain. Sometimes blurred in now. I know I did see a comment someone on the call was struggling with the blurred background. So again, it just depends on the technology that's being used. So just be open and talk about what works for people. Speak slowly and clearly. Raise the electronic hand to speak rather than interrupting, because that really throws people with hearing loss if just another voice comes on. So just little things like that, will really help during these meetings where maybe you have people who have hearing loss and people who have sort of regular hearing. So just a couple of things to remember there. Yeah,
excellent tips. Yeah, thank you, everybody. So we've got 2 more questions as part of the panel. So Louise, thank you. So in the UK, more than 40% of people over 50 years old have hearing loss. This is according to RNID, rising to more than 70% of people over the age of 70. But some people may not want to admit they have trouble hearing, despite the potential risks that this may pose. So not hearing the doorbell or alarms, or maybe understanding medical information correctly. So can you provide some suggestions about what advice and technology might help? So if I could bring in James to start with.
Sure. And I think what's helpful about the question is it reminds us that people's experience of being deaf, losing their hearing, whatever language you want to use, it is really different. And I'm acutely aware today that we're not a particularly diverse panel of people. And I think it is important to remember that one's experience of being deaf is kind of inextricable from one's life experience in many other ways. So if you are a Black person, a person of colour, if you are a trans person, if you are a disabled person with other impairments, all of those things are going to interact with your identity as a deaf person in a different way. And so I think it is important that we try to meet people where they are and understand people as individuals and think about their combined intersectional experience of difference. And the question you're posing about different percentages of people losing hearing at different stages of life. It's true that many older people lose their hearing. I think the data shows that around the age of 75, the likelihood of your hearing reducing quite drastically is quite significant. But of course, it depends what you spent the 75 years of your life doing up until that point as to whether or not how you will, cope with or engage with that experience. One of the advantages of wearing hearing aids as a younger person, although I'm not that young, I'm in my mid-40s, is that by the time I'm 75 and my hearing probably will be even worse, I have lots of experience of wearing hearing aids. And so my own journey through that will be very different to somebody who's encountering that for the very first time. So it's really important, I think, for us to think of people as individuals and recognise their life experience. I think when it comes to support, there are lots and lots and lots of really fantastic deaf organisations out there who are really ready and willing to help. So it's great that you're using statistics from RNID, fantastic charity, will be well known to lots of people on the call today. And there's a lot of resources and support on RNID's website, which are only getting better. They're investing a lot in their digital resources, which is great to see. Also, organisations like Royal Association for Deaf People run a service called Talk More, which supports people, particularly around mental health, particularly around connecting people who perhaps struggling with isolation. The organisation Hearing Dogs, which includes Hearing Link, provides lots and lots of great information. They can sell you technology, they can connect you through their link up clubs to other people perhaps experiencing hearing loss at the same age of life. So I think one of the things we've learned about mental health and the impact of deafness is it's good to talk. It's good to tell someone how you're feeling, and it's good to talk to someone else who might have a slightly similar experience, not necessarily the same, but something similar. So using technology like the technology we've been discussing today to connect, you don't have to be in the same place. You might join an online event perhaps to meet some people, and try to keep up as well with the changes in technology. I'm part of lots of Facebook groups. I'm sure other colleagues on the call are too, around deafness, and I learned recently how to use my iPhone to get live captioning, which has not been on the iPhone for a long time, although it's been on Google Pixel and Android and so on, but it's recently come in beta to the iPhone. You have to change your language to the US version of English, weirdly, in order for it to work. But I can now get live captions for a phone call, which I've never been able to get before on an iPhone. So, but I got all of that from a Facebook group. So I would really encourage people to look at social media for these very specific groups of people. That's I think often where social media is at its best. And we post a lot of Sign Health on our social media channels, but we also try really hard to reshare information from other charities, because we're stronger together. We're stronger when we work together and amplify each other's work, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. And yeah, we'll try and gather up as many resources as we can, and again share them on the webinar recording page. Stuart, I know you had some things to mention in response to this question that we discussed a while back, regarding the system that you use for your doorbell and the alarms.
Yeah, I've got a system installed which got a vibrator which I can put on my belt, and when someone rings our doorbell or our landline, it will vibrate and a little light will show up telling me whether it's a phone or the doorbell. We've also got a smoke alarm which will link to it as well. So that's quite handy, and the vibrator, when I'm not wearing it, sits in a little holder which I keep by my bed, and that recharges it. It's a rechargeable battery, and it's also got a device which I put under the pillow. So if someone rings the phone, calls on the phone while I'm in bed, they'll get the vibrator, and my pillow will vibrate, and so I'll know that it's there. Most of our phones have lights on them, so if I can't hear the phone, then I can at least see that it's lit up and it's ringing, which helps with that as well. Yeah. The other thing I've got is on the alarm clock is another vibrator which I can put under the pillow, and that's quite handy, because normally I have an alarm clock for an early morning call and then I will not be awake, so it's very handy for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ian, did you have anything you'd like to add in response to the question?
Yes, just been let down by technology. My mouse has stopped working, so sorry, it took me a while to get off of mute. I think on the question of kind of recognizing hearing loss, one of the things I used to be accused of, in a crowded environment, was just switching off and just not being part of the conversation. And subsequently I've learned that there's a physiological reason for that. Your brain literally switches off if it's struggling to hear, and then to interpret what it's hearing, it will literally shut down and stop that, and to give you a break, and then you can catch up again. So whereas I wasn't sure if it was just me being antisocial or not, there is actually that was one of the things that led me to get my hearing checked. It's absolutely a thing that you switch off if you're struggling to hear. So if anyone on the call who currently doesn't suffer from hearing loss or doesn't think they do, that's maybe something just to watch out for, a symptom, if you like, that is beginning to affect your sort of life, and time to have it checked.
Good advice. Thank you. And Matthew?
I don't have anything to add after what Stuart said. The Internet of Things, there are lots of devices that you could connect using a vibrator, or you could have a vibrating watch or a vibrating app. There's so many tech out there that connect to the fire alarm, smoke alarm, doorbell, and so on. And so there's lots of technology. All you need to do is do a bit of Google and decide what's best for you. I hope you don't mind, but I noticed on the Q&A, I could give you an answer for two of the questions. There was one about Bluetooth devices. One say, can you connect to more than one device at a time? No, you can't. Not with hearing aid. You can only connect to one Bluetooth device at a time. It's a bit of a pain, but you have to connect if you want to switch to another device. And also, someone is saying about university students. If they want to be able to hear to the lecture, well, you can give them what we call a microphone, called a Roger microphone, and that is a Bluetooth-enabled microphone. So if you've got a Bluetooth-enabled hearing aid or cochlear implant, you could give the Roger microphone to the lecturer or the person you're talking, and you would get a lot of clarity. That's all I have to say.
Okay, yeah, really good bit of tech to suggest. Yeah, if you're a student or work in universities, please do pass that on. So one more question for you all before we have. I can see there's tons of questions that have come through from attendees. So one of our focuses at AbilityNet in 2023 will be how the NHS can be more accessible. So with this in mind, do you have any suggestions about how hospital staff, GPs, any NHS employees can use tech to communicate with patients who are deaf or who have hearing loss? Matthew, I know when we talked about this, you had a great bit of tech that you use, I think, or no, your son uses. If you could share that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I did work on a project for the 111, the National Health Service 111, during the COVID, when you break it down. So I have some experience in the background. So one thing that the National Health Service 111 call need to provide caption. So that's something that they need to do. However, in the meantime, in the Ethereum, you can download an app which translates speech to text. Because at hospital, you've got to go wear a mask. And if you lip read or something, you can use the microphone. And one of my sons is a doctor, so he speaks to the app on his phone to translate his speech to text and show it. So I think most of all the National Health Service and NHS staff have a smartphone, so they could download an app, and or you could download your app and ask them to speak to the phone and translate their speech to text as you can read it. So that's one really big thing. Yeah, and they're the two main things that I would recommend. I'm just trying to remember what were the questions. There were two questions. What was the other one?
It was, can you suggest how any hospital staff or GPs can use tech to communicate with patients who are deaf or who have hearing loss? So that was one.
So that would download an app. Yeah. And what was the other one?
From your time working on 111 on the project.
Yeah, the NHS 111. At the moment, when you call them, I mean, you can do it on the line. If you want to call them, they need to somehow provide caption, which they don't right now. But you can, if you have a caption enabled phone like Apple, which Jane mentioned in the iPhone, but also the Google Pixel and some version of the Samsung, then you could dial in from your phone and it would translate speech to text real time. So you can use that way.
Okay. Thank you. James, I know you've been working on the accessible information standards. I wondered if you could share a bit more about that and yeah, the connection with NHS and providing better communication.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's some really good and exciting information here, because it's a source of a lot of frustration for many of us as deaf people, our interaction with health services, whether that's a GP or a pharmacist or an optician or a hospital ward or any kind of part of the NHS, or indeed social care too. Something called the Accessible Information Standard came into force in 2016, so it's 6 years old now, and it's going to be relaunched in April next year. And what that does is it means that it is a legal requirement for anybody who receives NHS funding or adult social care funding to ask people how they want to be communicated with. So we're talking about disabled people with communication needs, which includes deaf people, but it also includes blind people, people with learning disabilities, autistic people, anybody who would like to be communicated with in an alternative way. It puts the pressure on the provider of the service, so the GP surgery or so on, to ask, how would you like to be communicated with, to record that preference, and then to share that information with everybody you're going to come into contact with, and to make sure that they keep communicating with you in that way. It's a really very, very significant bit of kind of rights guidance. It's not its own legislation, so it's not accurate to call it legislation, but it is a legal requirement. So it is still mandatory. And so you can rely on the Accessible Information Standard to basically get the communication that you want as a disabled person with communication needs in a health setting. So if you want to be communicated with, as Matthew indicated, via captions, you can ask for that. But actually, if you want somebody to remove their mask and to lip read, you can ask for that too. It's up to you about what you want. It's not up to you to fall into the box that's been given to you. It's different to the Equality Act. It's not about reasonable adjustment. It's about what you want and what you need. So that includes British Sign Language interpreter, for example, or it might include information in Braille or recorded information or easy read information or and so on. So it's a really big deal. The problem is not enough people know about it, and not enough people kind of enforce it or talk about it. So we did a big piece of work with lots of other charities last year to try and survey people. We asked 1,000 people whether they saw that happening, both disabled people but also professionals, and the results are really frightening, sadly. The compliance is very poor, but NHS England are working very hard to relaunch the standard, as I say, next April, and luckily we're involved with that work, and they're trying really hard to improve the standard, to improve awareness of it. So I would encourage everybody on the call to look it up, and we can share some links to the information in the the information you're going to circulate later on, and to kind of know your rights and to ask for what you're due, because a lot of disabled people work very hard to win these rights, and we need to make sure that people are aware of them and working with us in a way that's accessible. My charity, Sign Health, we exist only because health information is inaccessible. There's no reason for deaf people's health to be poor. Deaf people should have the same health as hearing people. Unfortunately, we don't. We have really bad health because the system's bad, the system is inaccessible. And the way to make it accessible is through the Accessible Information Standard. So it's a very important piece of guidance. And I'd encourage everyone to kind of get empowered and talk to your local GP surgery about what you need.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we'll be sharing more about that, especially with the relaunch in April as well. Stuart, do you have anything more to add on this particular question?
Well, the only thing that's occurred to me is if you've got someone who is hard of hearing, then what you normally do is you try and face them and speak clearly. And if someone is elderly and their hearing's going, but they don't want to admit it, of course, then that probably becomes more important. I mean, you could say, why don't you try automatic captioning? But then it's like, you know, I don't need that. My hearing's fine. So that's the only thing I can think to add.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, just a question for Ian. Do you have anything to add on that point?
I don't really, other than, you know, just ask. So if it's at a GP surgery and, you know, you do require help with captioning or to, you know, to understand what's going on, just ask. I know our local GP surgery, you know, I actually just inquired, you know, what functions they have, and they're more than happy to, you know, accommodate people with a hearing loss or a vision loss. And they have some protocols in place. So often it's just a question of asking whether they do or don't. And, you know, I gather from James, I mean, that's new information for me, that there's actually, you know, a legal requirement, but certainly I think, you know, it's certainly worth asking to see if they can help you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for all of your suggestions and valuable insights into tech approaches that can help. So Louise, we did have a poll. I'm just looking at the time. I think we'll actually move straight on to questions from attendees, just so that we can ask as many questions as possible from attendees. I can see we've got 36. So yeah, we won't have a chance to go through everything today, but like I say, we'll pose the questions on email and share them with you afterwards. So let's have a look at the questions. I think that Matthew, you mentioned you were going to answer the question, and what was the second type of captions that you said? Not sure if you.
There are two types of caption. One is human caption, which is typed by an actual writer, like what we have right now. The other one is called auto or automatic caption, which is translates speech to text. So the two different needs. The one is human is much more accurate. It provides, you know, wrap around the nuance of the computation. It filled up the MIDI gap and made you look good. Where the auto caption translates word like by word, and if you have a speech impairment or a very strong accent, it doesn't always come up very well, like mine. But it actually, at the same time, it helped my speech because I'm trying to improve my speech by looking at the caption. But it's more real time. And I sometimes don't mind if it's not so accurate, so that I'm able to keep up with the computation. So they're the two main of caption.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Helen to James. Just a quick question of who can we follow up with about the Accessible Information Standard relaunch that's happening in April? Is it just, you know, is there a particular web address or just to Google Accessible Information Standard?
Hi, Helen. It's wonderful that you're joining the webinar today. There'll be a lot more information coming out when the standard relaunches in April. We'll be supporting that at Sign Health, so definitely keep an eye on our social media. But yes, it is, as you know, NHS England owns the standard, so they will be doing some communication on it. There's a lot of work to do. I'm really hopeful they can keep the timeline of the April relaunch, and we'll certainly do everything we can to help them. But if it gets delayed, then of course we'll update everyone. The standard isn't due to change radically or anything like that. I think our hope, working with NHS England, our hope is to, as I say, kind of reinvigorate people's understanding and awareness of it, because it didn't happen as well as we all wanted it to back in 2016. Yeah, we'll be working very hard at San Health to do a lot of communication about it in the spring, I guess.
Thank you. A question from Kat, which might be something that Ian and Stuart, you may have encountered this as tech volunteers. Do you have any suggestions if somebody experiences barriers with written text, so dyslexia, literacy, and other related issues? I don't know if that's something you feel able to respond to, or if it's something you want to think about.
Probably need to think about it a little bit, Annie. Is that on top of hearing loss? So as well as hearing loss, there's a problem with dyslexia as well. So it makes reading the captions difficult.
I think so.
Yeah, that's something I'd have to think about that a little bit. I think maybe Stuart, I don't know if you've got any suggestions, but yeah, I'll have to think about that for a bit.
Not specifically, no. I do know, I mentioned earlier that AbilityNet website has a number of fact sheets, and I mentioned one, hearing loss and computing, which got a minor useful information in it. But it's got it on a whole range of disabilities, and I know there is one on dyslexia, which might help anyone who has that difficulty.
Yeah, and there was just related to that, there was also a question about dementia and potential connections with hearing loss. I think we also have a fact sheet about dementia and computing. Just a point here from Lavinia Bramwell, who says she signed up for 999 via text messages too. So just something to mention in case people aren't aware that option is there. I think we're just looking at the time, we're just very close to the end of the session, but like I said, we'll gather up the questions and share them amongst our panel who've kindly agreed to look at them, and then we'll put the Q&As on the webinar recording page in the next couple of days, and then share that with you with a link to access it. So thanks so much again, Matthew, James, Ian and Stuart. Yeah, we're just a little bit more information about AbilityNet that you might not already be aware of, that we offer free IT support at home and online, along with fact sheets and webinars on our website at abilitynet.org.uk. You can also call our helpline on 0800 048 7642. We're open 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. And you can access the tech support at /at-home. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got lots of tech volunteers around the country to help solve any IT issues that you might have. Then we also run online training sessions on digital accessibility. You can find out more about those at /training. We have a special code that you can use on our 2023 courses, which is AbilityNet Webinar 10, and that's for 10% off. But we have free courses coming up in January. The first one is the Introduction to Digital Accessibility on the 19th of January, and then a training course, How to Build a Disability Inclusive Workplace, on the 25th of January. And then finally, you can also sign up to our e-newsletter for the latest announcements about accessibility, webinars like this session. And the next webinars coming up, we've got one next Tuesday on the 13th of December, where we'll be speaking with David Padmore and Matt Simpson of ITV. So just finally, thank you once again to Matthew, James, Ian and Stuart, and everyone who's joined us. And please do complete the feedback form that you'll be directed to at the end, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye, everybody.